The first bill we have on the agenda today is Representative Stevenson's bill. Members will be laying over House File 450. We had intended to move it out, but it's my understanding that it needs another amendment, which Representative Stevenson will explain so that we can have a discussion about the bill and the amendment that we anticipate coming, and then we'll lay it over and pull it back up again when that's ready. I will move that we lay over House File 450. Representative Stevenson, your bill is before us. Please go ahead and explain it to us.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. House File 450 establishes a regime around the crime of organized retail theft. We actually had a preview of this bill on the House floor last night. Thanks to Representative Grossel for that. But Minnesota does not currently have a crime of organized retail theft. We charge for new members, I work as a prosecutor for Hennepin County alongside the chair of this committee and when the legislature is not in session. And currently the way we handle retail theft, organized or not, is through a variety of statutes, including our theft statute, our shoplifting gear statute, our burglary tools statute. But what this bill is trying to do is create a differentiation between sort of low-level shoplifting offenses on the one hand, and much more serious, much more organized, and frankly, much more harmful organized retail theft, which is increasingly a problem in our community. And I think you'll hear from some testifiers about how that is impacting businesses in our community. But I will just say, from my own experience as a prosecutor, we do see a difference between sort of what you typically think of as a retail theft or a shoplift, a crime of convenience, of impulse, and increasingly some more organized and systemic retail theft that is much more problematic. So the bill gives law enforcement some tools in the form of access to certain financial records. It creates a new offense related to organized retail theft, defines it, creates enhanced penalties in certain circumstances. But on the flip side, it also tries to fix some of our laws that perhaps over-criminalize or over-penalize certain behavior that's probably more strictly thought of as shoplifting. So, and in some sense, what it also does is tries to standardize behavior that right now is handled very differently in different jurisdictions in the state. So there's a couple sections in the bill, Section 7, Section 8, that deal with an issue that I call trespass burglary. And to understand that, you have to understand that a burglary under Minnesota law is entering a building without consent and the intent to steal or commit a felony. That's all a burglary is. So let me give you a fact pattern. Let's suppose you go in to a Walgreens and steal anything, whatever you want. You know, a shirt, a candy bar, some Sudafed because you got a cold. Sudafed's a bad example since it's behind the counter. So let's go with Tylenol. Let's go with Tylenol, not Sudafed. Okay, you would steal something and you get caught. Okay, as long as you haven't stolen more than $1,000, you're going to be guilty of a misdemeanor or a gross misdemeanor, and you're going to probably be trespassed by the store. The store is going to give you a notice saying, "Don't come back here," which is totally reasonable. You just stole. You shouldn't go back. Now, let's suppose you come back during the time that trespass notice is operational and steal again. And let's suppose you steal a candy bar, you know, a $2 item. Instead of being guilty of a misdemeanor theft, you are now guilty of a felony under Minnesota law. Felony burglary in the third degree, because you have entered a building without consent, you had that trespass notice, and you stole. And this can lead to some really disproportionate situations. I once had a case where an individual who's in the circumstance took a bottle of mouthwash into the bathroom and drank the bottle of mouthwash in the bathroom. I mean, this person had a pretty serious substance abuse issue. And the charge that was submitted to the county attorney's office was for burglary. Okay? And it's not that there shouldn't be accountability for what happens there. It's just, I don't think that's a burglary. I don't think it should be treated like a burglary. But even if you do, you should be troubled by the fact that depending upon which county you are in Minnesota right now, that case is going to be handled differently. Some counties won't charge, their county prosecutors won't charge these trespass burglaries as felony burglaries. Some will, and some have charging guidelines where they'll charge them under some circumstances and some not. So it's problematic from my perspective that the same conduct gets treated so differently in different parts of the state. So these sections try to flesh that out a little bit more, and it creates a new element to the fourth-degree burglary statute that encompasses these trespass burglaries. So in most circumstances, that would now be a gross misdemeanor. But if you keep doing it, it eventually can be a felony. And that is the bill. Now, as the chair mentioned, we had some issues flagged for us after the amendment deadline that we want to address. So I appreciate the chair's willingness to hold over the bill while we continue to work on it. There's a technical change that probably needs to be made in the receiving portion of the bill to make clear that it's the person who's receiving the property has to have the intent to resell the merchandise. Right now, it's unclear if it's that person or the person who originally stole the merchandise has to have that intent. We should make clear where the intent lies. There's a interaction with the shoplifting gear statute that needs to be resolved. And there's also a problem with regard to the length of time that the warrants are active down in the final section of the bill. So there's some stuff we're still working to iron out, largely technical in nature. And I appreciate the chair's willingness to give us some more time to do that. I know that there's a lot of testifiers, and I know I talked a lot. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. And members, I'll just note too that we have requested a fiscal note, but that we don't have one yet. So if you're looking for that in your packet, that is why. Our first testifier is Bruce Newstad. So come on down. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. My name is Bruce Newstead with the Minnesota Retailers Association. I work with small retailers, family-owned Main Street retailers, regional retailers, and large national retailers. I'm happy to be here today. I will say this is the first time this bill has been heard in the House, and we're really pleased to be able to talk about this issue, not because it's a great issue, but it's one that needs to be addressed, and we're deeply appreciative to Chair Stevenson for his work on this. I work also as a board member of an organization called the Minnesota Organized Retail Crime Association that you'll hear from in just a moment. And as Chair Stevenson said, this is a bill that's been worked on kind of in chunks, and I appreciate the good definition on the burglary changes. By the way, we think those make sense. I haven't talked to law enforcement or a store that doesn't say, you know what, that kind of makes sense based on the practice today. The other main part of the bill relates to sort of, as the chair described, as defining organized retail crime. And just from our perspective, it's definitely time to catch up Minnesota statutes with kind of the modern day career criminal. Today, there isn't the mob and the syndicate that we remember from the 70s, 80s, and maybe into the 90s. Today, organized retail crime looks a lot different. And it's based on technologies, and it's based on opportunity. And I think what Chair Stevenson's bill here does is a nice job sort of defining that, carving that out in statute. And we think of it really as a modernization of the statute as opposed to kind of a new offense. That's just my perspective. Organized retail crime is a $90 billion problem across the country. And believe it or not, you wouldn't think that maybe here in good old Minnesota we don't see as much of it. We actually do. And the problem continues to only get worse. It gets worse because you used to see the stories of national retailers and kind of big activities. You'd see those on the news. You're going to hear a story today of a little Canada entrepreneur who poured his life savings into his store, only to have all that life savings stolen and the store closed. So my point on that is this is not just a problem for large retailers or mid-sized retailers. It is a real problem for small retailers in each of our communities. I'm going to end there, Madam Chair, with just a quick note. Actually, a committee that you were in a couple days ago, I heard Chair Stevenson say this is not a silver bullet to a bill he was working on. And honestly, this is not the silver bullet for organized retail crime, but this is a great step in the right direction to modernize our laws. So with that, Madam Chair, I know there's some supplemental materials in your packet that I'd invite you to take a look at. And I'll end just by saying modernizing this area of law is not just good from a theft perspective, it's actually good for the safety of our consumers, for the safety of our retail workers, for the safety of our retailers, and really ultimately the safety of our communities as well. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Cody Johnson. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Cody Johnson, and I am the co-president of Minnesota Organized Retail Crime Association, or commonly known as MNORCA. I'm also a loss prevention professional of 17 years, but I am appearing today by my MNORCA co-president role. In 2014, a group of dedicated law enforcement, crime analysis, corporate fraud, and loss prevention investigators and prosecutors created MNORCA as a 501c4 nonprofit public-private partnership to address ever-changing criminal enterprises. MNORCA uses tools such as a website complying with data privacy laws to share real-time crime information and intelligence on criminal groups to enhance the identification of offenders and the targeting of criminal enterprises. MNORCA strives to increase operational efficiency and effectiveness by minimizing redundancy and maximizing investigative potential through regional quarterly information meetings, ongoing training seminars, policy initiatives, and an annual conference. As you have heard, ORC is much more than shoplifting. ORC encompasses the multitude of theft and fraud schemes that occur in and through retail environments, thus negatively impacting commerce and undermining consumer safety, employee safety, as well as overall public safety. Offenders involved in ORC commit crimes to include theft, identity theft, fraud, and other property crimes in order to illegally obtain merchandise. These stolen or fraudulently obtained items are monetized, oftentimes provided the resources to support other unlawful acts. ORC and related crimes cost legitimate businesses, American taxpayers, and our government over $30 billion per year. I want to make sure you have time to hear from Mr. Dillon today, so I'll cut my comments off there and end by saying I strongly support differentiating petty theft from organized retail crime in Minnesota laws. Thank you for considering the bill before you today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Walter Dillon is the next testifier. Welcome to the committee. You can introduce yourself and begin your testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Good morning, everybody. My name is Walter Dillon, and
And if you don't mind pulling that mic, if you can, a little bit closer. Maybe
Is that
moving it a
better?
little- That's much better. Thank you.
Okay.
We start over again.
Sorry, guys. My name is Walter Dillon, and I had a small sneaker shop in Little Canada. Kind of was like a dream of mine for a while, and kind of like talked my wife into going into business with me and going for a sneaker shop. You know, nobody in my family never did it. I just went out on a whim and went for it. But within, I would say about 4 or 5 months, I was broken into about five times. And it kind of just like crushed me. You know, it was 3 things I always wanted to be in life. I was a good family man, a good businessman, and a pillar of my community. With those incidents, it kind of broke some of those things. My loving wife, she supported me through it. I didn't really seem to get too much help from law enforcement or whatever. And I don't think it was a personal thing. I think they just had so much on their plate that they couldn't get to me, just being a small business. And just being broken into, a lot of people was disappointed. A lot of people was disappointed. And with the last break-in, what made this one so unique was my wife was in labor February 23rd. This time last year, my wife was in labor. And as she was giving birth, my ADT system called me. And I knew what it was. And I had to leave the birth of my son to run down to my store to address the issue of somebody breaking into the store. It broke my heart. I couldn't even cut my son's umbilical cord. I missed it. Completely missed the birth of my son because somebody was breaking into my store. Devastated me. So, just want to let you guys know that being a small business, and I believe these is organized guys breaking into these stores, crushing their dreams, because they put me out of business, but they still going on. They still thriving. It put me in a depression for a while, Now remember, my wife just gave birth. I got a brand new son at home. And I was going through something also. And I do believe these is organized crimes. I don't believe the punishment is harsh enough. And they're doing more damage than anything, especially to small businesses, who's actually trying to be pillars of the community and do something positive. I had about 4 young guys working with me, and I knew the time when they was working with me, they wasn't nowhere close to trouble. They was nowhere close to trouble. That's the part of me giving back to the community, being a pillar of my community. It was a family business. Me and my wife, we love coming into the sneaker shop and greeting the customers Saturday, Sunday, and just seeing the smiles on those guys' faces when they come and buy a shoe or just come in to talk. Just talk about the latest thing going on. And I was supporting my family in the most rightest way you could ever support your family. I was supporting my family. My kids was good. My wife was good. My community was good. I was good. And I just feel like the break-ins constantly, no matter how much I upgraded my alarm system, it's just more break-ins, more break-ins. They just crushed all those dreams I had, crushed them all. And this was in Little Canada. I thought this was the second safest place in Minnesota besides my home. With me having so many break-ins in my plaza, my lease was forced to be non-void. So not only did I get robbed, but I got kicked out also. I got broken into so much that my insurance didn't even honor any more claims. There was no more claims for the year. I was already 4 or 5 months into my store and my new location with the 5 break-ins that the insurance didn't even honor it. So I never got any compensation for anything that got stolen or damaged. Me and my wife, we had to eat those charges. The plaza we was renting out, we had to vacate that. And I had to just go on with my life best way I could while those guys is out there still thriving and still doing the same thing. They don't stop, they don't quit. Why would they? There's nothing to stop them. Like I say, I upgraded my alarm systems every time afterwards. And it still got me no closer to catching whoever was doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. I want to make sure that we have enough time to discuss this bill too.
Yes.
I didn't know if you had another sentence you wanted
Nope.
to say. Okay, great.
I said my piece.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and I'm sorry for those horrible
Well,
experiences.
let's
for
make
you.
sure this get passed.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else on the list, but I don't know if there are any other members of the public who wish to testify. And I'm not seeing anybody, so we will go ahead and move to member discussion. Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank you so much, Representative Stevenson, for bringing this forward. I've got I know this bill's being laid over, and so I guess I want to talk with you separately about a couple pieces. But just as I was looking at this, maybe I'll bring up a couple points now. One is, as I'm thinking about the changes to the burglary offenses, just one thing to consider, I guess, as it moves forward is individual buildings versus chains. So I'm thinking about somebody who's trespassed from somebody who's stolen a bunch from Target stores, and I feel like often in my county anyway, somebody will get a stay away order from all Target stores. The way this is phrased is, if you enter the building within 1 year after being told to leave the building and not return, and that might be something just to think about kind of how that works. And maybe we want to just restrict it to the individual store, given the nature of this. We don't want to have a chain, but just something for you to consider. And maybe I'll note in my county, it is the case that it does, I think our practice is that it generally does take a couple times of somebody entering and having a stay away order, and then your trespass order, somebody comes in precisely because it is a felony, right? That we don't want to necessarily bring felony charge for somebody who's shoplifting a small amount after being told. The way this is set up is, it's just the one time after 1 year, which makes sense to me. I do think we want to think about how this is structured, so it wouldn't be interpreted that circumstances that don't apply. I'm looking at your paragraph B on page 8, I guess the two paragraph Bs, that somebody would not be, if they fall outside of B, they then go back to A and still can get charged with a felony, even if, it's more than a year, even if they don't have one of those prior convictions. I really like the way you've structured this, but these are just a couple of drafting points to consider, probably along with our amazing counsel. So just a few thoughts for you. I've got a couple thoughts on the organized retail theft piece of it as well. Maybe we can talk about that separately. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Further discussion? Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair Moeller, and I think it's going to start a dangerous precedent because I know from the other bills coming up, I'm going to be agreeing with Representative Pinto several times in the next week here. But yeah, we have concerns also about the wording of it, and we have the specific language that says after being told to leave, as opposed to using the trespass terms. Being trespassed from a building is a specific process and a notification. We question, as Representative Pinto pointed out, is it all the chains? Is it one store? I look at Walmart. It's got 80 stores in the state alone. Could you hit all 80 stores and just keep going to a different one and in the end of the year just start over again? We're confused by that. And then, do you want it to be a specific trespassing notification, or what constitutes notification and formal notice? That's our concerns. If you want to work on that with your amendment and clean that up, just to make it better and more enforceable. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Representative Stevenson.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback from both Representative Novotny and Representative Pinto, and I think in particular the chain issue is something really worth thinking about. The truth is, funny story, this section, and I don't know if Mr. Johnson recalls this, but this was actually this part of this bill was the first thing I worked on as not even sworn in, but elected legislator. I emailed Mr. Johnson from my Gmail account and asked for help drafting this. And my memory is that there was a reason why we went with the asked not to return that had to do with trespass notices. And I see Mr. Johnson's reaching for his microphone. I wasn't going to put him on the spot, but if he has more memory about why we settled on this language, I certainly am always impressed by his memory and defer to him on that. But that's why we did that. I do also just want to say briefly before Mr. Johnson speaks, to your point about going around the state to all these places, keep in mind that we're still talking about conduct that isn't rising up to a felony for any number of different reasons. So, for example, the person who testified, the business owner here, who was talking about breaking in to his store, right? That doesn't fall under this section of the bill because the store has to be open to the public, right? And he was talking about being broken into. You break in, you're still in third-degree burglary, felony land. Likewise, if you're stealing more than $1,000, that's a felony theft. And remember that we have an aggregate rule in Minnesota. So if you were to go from store to store to store, even if they're in different counties, we can aggregate that together to get over 1,000 and get to the felony threshold. So it's an excellent point that we should think about the chain issue. I think I recognize that. I just also want to point out that these things all kind of work in concert. But on the enter and not return language, I don't know if Mr. Johnson recalls how we talked about it.
Yeah, it looks like he is ready to answer that question. Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, members, Ben Johnson with House Research. The language is identical to the current trespass statute, which is section 609.605. It's subdivision 1, paragraph B, clause 8. That clause says that it's a trespass to return to the property of another within 1 year after being told to leave the property and not to return. So that's why the language is in the statute as it is.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any follow-up, Representative Novotny?
No, Chair, thank you.
Great. And it does sound like these discussions will be helpful to have before we bring this bill back up again. Representative Whitty.
Thank you. This is an issue I've heard from retailers in my district, and one that I experienced firsthand working in law enforcement. I like that we're having this discussion about trespassing, because the times when I went, even to a chain, they would get a trespass notice and told not to go back to that same store, but any others, because the problem is that's where they go return it to. They may steal it from Burnsville, but then they go to Egan, and that's where they collect the money. So I think we really should have those discussions. So I'm glad all of us are open to that, but that's just given a little experience. But what surprised me was to hear from a local grocery store about how it impacts their bottom line. What is most stolen item in one grocery store in Lakeville would surprise you. It's Tide detergent. They go to Facebook Marketplace and search for Tide, and you'll see a lot of options for sale. And I don't think those are the people that are buying them in the pallet and the small margins that hurts the stores. So I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. I'm glad we're going to have more discussions on the trespassing thing, because I think it can make a big difference for our retailers and, give them some tools. Thank you.
All right. I'm not seeing any further member discussion. Closing comments, Representative Stevenson.
I appreciate the great instruction, great conversation and the tips, and happy to work on those and look forward if you have other suggestions. I know Representative Pinto said he'd somebody who's going to talk offline, but extend to everyone else on the committee if they have ideas. Happy to talk those through. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll renew my motion and lay over House File 450.